Born on June 18, 1942 in Liverpool, England, James Paul McCartney is an English singer, composer, poet, writer, artist, humanitarian, and entrepreneur. With John Lennon, he co-founded one of history's most influential and successful bands ever, the Beatles. With George Harrison and Ringo Starr, their music and influence is still felt today. A staunch vegetarian, Paul continues to play to sold-out crowds across the world, and recognized by many to be the single most successful musician in history. But you already knew that. So, here are 10 things you probably didn't know about Paul McCartney. Number 10. His father missed his birth. Though that may sound harsh, Paul's father, James McCartney, was a volunteer firefighter during World War II, and it was his job that kept him away from seeing his son being born. It was England in the 1940s, after all. I'm sure he was probably busy at the time. Number 9. He is a pretty good drummer. Though he was the bassist of the Beatles, Paul is quite adept at several instruments, including the guitar, piano, and the drums. In fact, he played the drums on several of the Beatles songs, including Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, Martha My Dear, Wild Honey Pie, and the Ballad of John and Yoko. Number 8. He was once arrested for setting a condom on fire. While getting ready to leave Hamburg, Germany early in the Beatles' career, Paul and then bandmate Pete Best were packing in their room in the dark and, in order to see a little better, they stuck a condom on the wall and lit it on fire. Accused of trying to burn the building down, Paul was arrested and detained for several hours before being released. Number 7. His first instrument was not a guitar. Though you might assume as much, Paul's first instrument was not a guitar. It was actually a nickel-plated trumpet given to him by his father, a trumpet player himself, on his 14th birthday. Paul traded it in for a guitar shortly after, saying that, quote, "It's hard to sing while playing the trumpet." Number 6. He once played to what is believed to be the largest paying crowd for a solo concert in history. To say that people like Paul McCartney's music is a bit of an understatement. And on April 21st, 1990, Paul played a show at the Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro to a record number 184,000 people. Number 5. One of his songs inspired John Lennon to write music again. According to the book Paul McCartney, A Life, John Lennon was once driving to visit his assistant when Paul's song Coming Up came on the radio. The next day, John couldn't get the song out of his head, and it was, quote, "driving me crackers." At the time, Lennon hadn't written anything in 5 years, but was inspired by the music of his friend and former bandmate, and started writing songs that would eventually end up on his albums Double Fantasy and Milk and Honey. Number 4. He never felt in competition with the Rolling Stones. Though the press wanted people to believe so, Paul never saw himself in competition with the Rolling Stones. Instead, he felt more in competition with Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys. Both men were bass players, and both wrote most of the music in their respective bands. Paul once called the Beach Boys' album Pet Sounds one of the greatest albums he had ever heard. Number 3. He almost won an Oscar for an afternoon's work. In 1973, Paul was asked to write the song for the new James Bond film, Live and Let Die. He agreed and wrote the song in an afternoon with his wife Linda. The song reached number 2 and was nominated for Best Original Song at the 1973 Academy Awards. we're lost to the song The Way We Were. Number 2. His first solo album was completely composed by him. Following the breakup of the Beatles, Paul's first solo album, McCartney, was released in April of 1970. Besides a few vocal tracks from his wife Linda, Paul wrote every song and played every instrument on the album by himself. The album had mixed responses from the critics. Number 1. He is the only other person to ever front the band Nirvana. In 2012, former Nirvana drummer and Foo Fighters frontman Dave Grohl was producing the documentary called Sound City. During this time, Grohl, an avid Beatles fan, called up McCartney and asked if he wanted to jam with him and a couple of his friends. Paul had the day off and accepted the offer. He drove to meet Grohl, and as it turns out, the friends he was talking about was former Nirvana bassist Chris Novoselic. They recorded the song Cut Me Some Slack, which ended up winning a Grammy for Best Rock Song. Paul called. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to see more videos like this that are uploaded weekly, please hit subscribe. If there's a certain celebrity that you would like to see featured in an upcoming video, please leave their name in the comment section below.